We're in the middle of a series on intuitive parenting, and I want to continue talking about one of the areas of maturation that our kids are experiencing during their growing up years, and that is emotional maturation. It's a very broad topic, and I'm doing my best to give you pointers that can help you be more intuitive in working with your children or your child to help them develop a sense of themselves, to help them develop a sense of their own strengths. Your goal is not to make being parenting always very, very simple and very easy, but it is to equip them with the ability for them to have lives that are happier and more filled with ease than if you take away their ability to have this emotional development happening at younger and younger ages. So let's take a peek at another element of the emotional maturation process and a way that you can support your kids in their development. I also want to take a moment that, this is something I make sure that I say at seminars with people, is when you hear suggestions that can help you guide your child to a better place, I think it's not uncommon for people to feel like they failed as a parent or they've made mistakes. And that sense of inadequacy might make you feel less powerful or less helpful. But I want you to understand that you, like every person, you're always doing the best that you can wherever you are journeying. And even though you might want to switch things up or change them, or maybe even keep things the way they are, don't be harsh on yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just know that you always did as good as you could with what you knew at that moment. And you are maturing in parallel to your child maturing. Sometimes I'll work with clients whose parents are grown, or they're aware that no matter what age their child is, that they echoed really inadequate parenting of their own childhood, and that it's really harmed the development of their own kid, and they come to me in a little bit of a panic. But what I always say to them is, number one, we'll work on not judging oneself, but we also work on saying there's no moment in the life of your child that it's too late for you to step in and become a more attuned, aligned, supportive, helpful parent. It's never too late. I don't care if your kid is 50. It's never too late, okay? And perhaps at the end of this series, I'll even talk to you about how to help have conversations with children who are various ages, how to help them understand how you parented them at different stages in their life, and ways that you would like to help them, guide them differently today. But for now, we're going to talk about guiding your children in understanding their own reactions. Oftentimes we're so busy in our day-to-day context that we're looking at something that's immediately in front of us. I got to make dinner. I got to get this one to dance practice. I got to get this one off the video game. I got to make sure this one gets a bath. I got to make sure this happens. And we're so involved in tasks that it's not easy to, kind of breathe into what's the big whole picture here. We'll go and, set up a nice space where we buy all kinds of nice lawn furniture for the summer and put out a barbecue grill. And then the family comes around and they have their barbecue and corn on the cob, and we feel like, oh, good, perfect family. And we wait for those moments to maybe bring out the best of ourselves or look at the whole picture of what our goal set is. It doesn't work like that. It's showing up all the time, as often as you possibly can, with the big picture in your mind. What do we want this experience for our kids growing up to be like? And so, as I mentioned in the last video, one of the first things to look at is, how are you reacting? How are you behaving? What are you doing when you feel stressed? What are you doing when you have a lot on your plate? What are you doing when you feel like your child is not doing what they should be doing? One thing that is important to understand is that you can't keep parenting only in that second there is a bigger picture here that runs through the whole of your child's childhood. So every now and then you're going to find these moments where you can talk about things, not preach, not advise, not command, not tell, not ram something down somebody's throat. But there's going to be these moments where you can just chat. And during those moments, whether you're making chocolate chip cookies or you have a long ride to a soccer tournament, during those moments you can talk, but not at them, but with them. And one of the best ways to do this is through narrative. Narrating things that you've experienced or seen, and don't talk directly about that kid. So let's use an illustration. So imagine you're on the way to take your son to a baseball game, and everybody's quiet and it's just a feel-good kind of day and he's kind of excited. It's a great time to say something like, hey, did you see how Jason was playing in the outfield last game? You know, like he was working so hard and hustling, and it didn't really have that much of an effect on the game, but it was so cool to watch him work all the time. Like he never gives up. And your son will be like, yeah, I did see that, or that was good. And then I might say, listen, you know, one of my favorite quotes, I remember listening to what Joe DiMaggio said, and a reporter asked him, why do you always work so hard, even though there's no consequence to the game on every play? And his answer was, because I never know when there's some kid that's seeing me for the first time, so I always want to give it my best. And you leave it at that. You let the kids say whatever they want to say back to you. But what you've done is you've created a moment and you've planted a seed. You haven't criticized him. You haven't told him I'm telling you a story because you need to improve the way your attitude is developing. You haven't had an argument. You haven't tried to force feed him something. You only had a conversation. And if you learn to take the quiet moments and the happy times that you have together and not overdo it, but just pepper that with little philosophies or life thoughts or examples of people that they might respect or admire. I was always big on, still am, sending little clips of different people that are doing things that are courageous, that are aligned with my kids' interests. So if you just keep modeling and showing possibilities, what you're doing is you're planting seeds within them that they can develop within them. So they're not off-put, they're not turned off. And oftentimes you'll see as your kids grow up, they take ownership of those seeds and they are mentioning those kinds of things to other people. And I'm going to tell you, 9 out of 10 times, they'll never know you had anything to do with it, but that's part of parenting. So you just feel, all right, good. I can't believe it's 2.5 years since I said that on the way to Riverside that day. And here he is telling his teammate about showing up for a game. Let it. That's the point. That's the point. That's the point. So in addition to other parenting techniques, having a quiet narration of different thoughts or traits or characteristics that are modeled by others in their peer set or in the world or throughout history. You have a long time with them while they're growing up. Don't give them 18 quotes in a day, but just pepper it here and there when you know it's appropriate, when it's meaningful, and when it doesn't necessarily feel like it's connected to something that you think that they should be doing better. If you develop a relationship with your kid that they always think you're criticizing them, they're going to learn how to tune you out. And I'm going to tell you the truth, I hope they do. So pick moments when they don't see your conversation with them as criticism. I recognized as a parent that I treat my kids like people. I don't treat them like they're blank and without any capabilities of their own. And within that, if I treat them like people, I can have conversations with them that I would have with friends or anyone else that's in my life that matters to me. I don't treat them like I own them. I don't treat them like they're property. I don't treat them like they're good or bad. I just treat them like they're people. And also another part that can really help is you have had a long and worthy life. And within that life. You've had a ton of experiences. So the narration process is not only narrating little bits and pieces of people who have succeeded, because too much of that's going to give your child the idea that you have to be at this level of fame to be worthy, or this level of success to be adequate. So make sure you're doing this kind of narrative with everyday experiences as well. Oftentimes I will say something like, I remember when I was in college and I had a 17-page paper due, and I waited until the last night to do it. And, you throw in a little humor. I had to use a typewriter. This was not easy. Backspace every time I got a letter wrong. You make them feel a part of the story or see the humor in it. And then tell them how you felt the next day when you were finishing it up and pulling it out of the typewriter at 6:30 in the morning. So you're letting them know that you've experienced procrastination. You've experienced not wanting to do a paper. You've experienced the consequence of staying up until 6:30 in the morning to do it. So these little narratives help them feel supported. They help you welcome them into knowing that you're approachable, that you can understand things. And once in a while, I'll just pull a story out that is relevant to something that they're really living. And even if they can't necessarily implement the benefit of that story immediately, again, the seed is planted. And what you'll see is those seeds, not advice, not criticism, not commands, not shoving these things at them, but this little narrative, this philosophy, this thing that just kind of blends around their lives. It creates emotional maturity within them. It gives them a place to be. It gives them a place to strive for. Okay? I let go of thinking any one of my kids is supposed to turn out a certain way. I let go of thinking any one of them has to be a list of what makes them be able to be worthy or acceptable or good or enough or anything like that. And I learned that you got to be so flexible. I'll give you an example of that, and it can help you realize you can be a good parent and you can be an intuitive parent even if the outcome is not where you think you would love for it to be. Third child. You're supposed to read to your kid. You're supposed to read to your kid. This kid hated when I read to him. Hated it. Come on, I'm so used to this. You take your bath, you scrub up, you sit in my arms, we pick out a book together, we find our favorites, we read every night. It's such a good bond. I always did this, always thought it was a great idea. This kid, not at all. The bedtime ritual is, Mom, just hit 3 balls at me. Just hit 3 balls at me. Just hit 3 balls at me. Just 3. All right, tonight just do 4. No, all right. This is his ritual. He doesn't care about a book. And as soon as I let go of what I believed was good parenting, I realized, well, maybe that's not what's going to be right for him. Maybe there's another way. Maybe there's another approach. Maybe I don't have to squeeze him into a narrow channel. Maybe I'll guide him to appreciate learning and expanding through ways that are not necessarily reading a book every night. Maybe I'll trust that the love of books will ignite, or maybe even not ignite, in accordance with his own soul's journey. I'll always provide the opportunities. I'll always make suggestions. I'll always let them influence what I bring into the house or go to the library with them. But I also recognize he's not going to be living my life. He's only going to be living his life. So the other part of it is to always remember that to be really flexible in what you see as the best choices or what you see as good parenting or bad parenting. Widen your opportunity to understand that this child is a very, very unique child. And it's not as though this technique in intuitive parenting is foregoing having structure or discipline or, a set of guidelines for them that help them to develop. You're not foregoing it. You're just using those tools in the context of allowing your child to participate in the whole of the discoveries. Now that said, in the narrative section, as I was talking about, this is where I used my intuition to help kids make decisions about what they were doing with their time. I know we live in a world where, internet and video games and social media is incredibly compelling. I'm not going to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but what I will say is your children aren't growing up when you grew up. Accept it. They're growing up in the world as it is now. So you can do everything you can to put really rigid and strident rules out there, or you can even leave everything 100% up to them and hope they figure it out. But even in an area where you don't necessarily understand the consequences of the bombardment or the onslaught of constant electronics, you can guide them in a way where there might be balance as they and their generation navigate a world of increasing technology and increasing information. So the narrative that I would have going on through our lives would be about what we're doing with our time, how it makes us feel. Once in a while I'll be like, I can't believe I just sat in front of the computer working for like 3 hours today. My body just feels terrible. I got to get up and go for a run. That makes such a bigger impact on your child's choice than going downstairs and saying, you've been on this computer for 3 hours, or you've been on your video game for 3 hours already. Get up, go outside, come on, move your body. What kid's going to be like, oh yeah, Ma, you're right. Let me go get up and turn the video game off and go move my body. It doesn't work that way. It works by showing, it works by narrating, it works by suggesting. It also works by influencing through offering other choices rather than always assuming that they can think of them. One thing might be, hey, listen, I know you're like really into such and such game right now. How about you play until like 6, and if you want, we can go down and grab some bread and go feed the ducks. So give them other thoughts so they don't even get into a world where that's all they can perceive life is. Okay? You might not know how to navigate this new horizon for them, and they don't either. So you got to figure it all out together. And any extreme one way or the other isn't going to bring a balanced perspective, or at least a perspective where they can figure out what their choices are. I recognize that there are moments when it's okay. It's pouring out and your kid just had 3 tests that week and it's a Saturday. And if, maybe that day they're going to sit in front of video games for 10 hours. You know what? You can judge me. I'm actually okay with that because I feel like they got something out of their system. They got some stress out of their body. And then the next day the sun comes up and they're all popping up and going outside and trying to find something to do. Or they're running around the house that day in between a round on their game and saying, I love a rainy day. I love doing nothing once in a while. But they know that it's a once in a while thing. Okay, so too much rigidity also doesn't give them the benefit of starting to notice how their choices are affecting them, what their mood is like, how they feel, and how much they are experiencing in making their own life. I know there's a lot. It's a lot for them, and it is a lot for you. The best thing that you can possibly do is to appreciate that it's a partnership. This is not all on you. It's a partnership. Allow your children to participate, offer them as much trust as you can in their own decision making, give them as many opportunities to choose, but then guide them when they can use a little bit of a push in areas that may still be underdeveloped. In our next video, we're going to talk a lot about the maturation process of spirituality. Think of it as like the philosophy of life. And both emotional and spiritual maturation are the 2 areas of maturity that influence or change every area of your child's life, which is the reason I'm talking about them first. And then with the next 3, we'll see how emotional and spiritual maturity affect a child's development in intellectual, financial, and social maturity. As always, I'm so appreciative of you tuning in. I love your comments. I love your feedback. I answer your questions. So keep in touch, and I will see you next time. Thank you.